Okay, welcome everyone to this webinar. And as I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available to everyone who registered, maybe early next week. And yeah, I think we can start at 1 o'clock. Maybe one more minute. We can see more people joining. Yeah. I think I'll just start introducing. So yeah, hi, I'm Niranjana and I work with Horizon Nuva and manages the Connecting Nature Enterprise platform. And it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar. This is the fourth webinar in the autumn webinar series that we have been running over this month. And this will be the second last of the series as well. And we have been doing this, we have been delivering this webinar in connection with the Go Nature Positive project consultation, which will be discussed later in the session. And today's webinar is on blue economy and regenerative ocean farming. We have Gareth Murphy here, who is the seaweed project manager at Simply Blue Group. He'll share his experience working with the marine industry for over 20 years, and his experience includes his latest project, North Sea Farm 1. I'm sure he'll be excited to share more about it with you all. And we also have Simona Fondate from Western Development Corporation, and she'll explain the Go Nature Positive concept node and discuss the ongoing global consultation and the feedback survey associated with it. And a few things to note in terms of housekeeping. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom panel to ask your questions, and we'll address them at the end of the session. You can use the chat feature to introduce yourself, just say hello, where you're from, what you're doing, and also feel free to leave comments as we proceed with the webinar. And I think that's all from my end, and over to you, Gareth.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gareth Murphy. I'm here to talk to you about regenerative ocean farming and the blue economy. Sorry, is my screen here on the left? I'm the community ambassador for the Connecting Nature Enterprise platform in conjunction with the GoNaturePositive and the Seafarer project. My role is to foster connections between ocean innovators, businesses, researchers, and contribute to transition to a nature positive economy. Bit of background for you. I'm from Bantry Bay down in West Cork. I'm a second generation mussel farmer. John at the top of your screen is there, and then we've been involved in mussel farming since the origins in Bantry Bay back in the 70s. Back then in 2019, I started looking at what opportunities were coming next. And I started attending offshore wind conferences and seeing, look, what opportunity was coming down the way. And I met a man by the name of Christoph Harewood, director of a company called Simply Blue. And Simply Blue were a small company at the time, 3 people. And he started talking to me about floating offshore wind, which captivated my interest in terms of saying, how are you going to float a turbine? Was my main interest for engaging with him. But what he said to me in the day was we needed to look at the blue economy as a one piece in a whole. We need to look at from offshore wind, what that can do for economy, and then how we can interact and include more aquaculture. So we talked about seaweed, mussels, and salmon. And so from that day, I said, it's very interesting, Christoph. I said, we have all 3 of those in Bantry. Why don't you come down and have a chat with us, and I can show you to the farm. So Christoph and Sam Rock-Perks, the CEO of Simply Blue, came down and we kind of brought him to the farms, had a discussion. And I walked away at the end of the period that day and I came in and we'd no real kind of follow up from it. And I just said, look, guys, seaweed needs light to grow. It needs a load of space. If I was to look at anyone, I would do, that is where I'd focus. And from that small conversation, I heard nothing for 3 years. And then in 2022, Christoph called me out of the blue, and he said, we now have 80 people working in the organization, and we're interested in looking at seaweed cultivation. Would you be interested in joining it? So we established Orna Farraga, and it's a spin out of Simply Brew Group, a leading early stage project developer. They're involved in offshore wind, sustainable fuels in Canada with our SAF project, sustainable aquaculture, and wave energy with the Saoirse project. We're an Irish company with a global reach, and we're headquartered in Cork. So part of my role within this, and I said the first 3 months of my role with Simply Blue was, let me go out and see what's on the market and how we're growing seaweed at the minute. And my trips took me over to the Netherlands, up to Scotland, to the Sam Seaweed Academy. And then for me and my background, I went up to Norway, because that's where a lot of the innovation in aquaculture came across. And I met Kim Christensen from Arctic Seaweed. And I said, look, can I work on your farm for a couple of weeks? And so we've went in, and I've been involved in 2 seedings and 2 deployment systems. And they have a very different approach to seaweed farming that I've seen. They involve their mechanical engineers to start with, and his initial entry into the industry was looking at how we're going to do this and how do we get to scale to that level. So as you can see, so it involves high density seeded lines. They have a direct seeding machine for it, highly automated, a cultivation process based on direct seeding, end-to-end integration, and they have an interconnectable modular design that's adaptable to conditions and species. And then if you see over on the right hand side of the screen, it involves minimal surface clutter in comparison to your regular seaweed farms that you'd see along the coast. Here's just a short video with an overview. So you can see the farm on the right in the lower down move. They move all their processing equipment onto a landing ferry, and so they process on board and have a stabilized production system, and it allows them to continuously harvest on their system. On the left hand side here, you're going to see the farm in the raised up situation. So you can just connect the system, and so the vessel doesn't need to move. So you have a continuous production line, allowing you to get significant harvests on the soil. Now, the dream would be to operate in Norwegian waters, flat calm conditions. So there's a bit of rigging to do on that to bring in. So once we had our technology identified, we had to start looking at site selection. So we had a good knowledge of Ireland and its ability, and our nutrient-rich waters to do it. So we entered into a site selection process, and we've applied for an aquaculture license in Galway Bay. So I'm here talking about restorative ocean farming, and what does that mean? Well, it has some conditions based on it. So farms are situated where environmental outcomes are needed. Species are cultivated that provide the environmental outcomes intended. Equipment enhances the delivery of environmental benefits, and management practices that align and enhance local processes are adopted. And the intensity and the scale of the culture look to enhance ecosystems. So why seaweed? That's simply Rihanna Reeves quoted that seaweed is sexy. It enhances biodiversity. It removes CO2, produces O2, reducing ocean acidification. It absorbs nitrates and phosphates, leading to healthier oceans. And it's a sustainable source of marine protein. And it's in the fastest growing food sector in the world. The Seafarers group have just recently completed a workshop on licensing, and I'm just going to give you some of my experiences related to some of them outcomes. So the current experience of licensing is that there's inconsistency across regions. I'll give you an example. Our North Sea Farm 1 project in the Netherlands went from application to consent in 9 weeks. In Ireland, that application can take, my own application has been in for 2 years, and it can go on to be 4 years. We have excessive administration burdens. So we have navigation. I'll give you an example. In Ireland, when you get your aquaculture license, following which maybe a 3-4 year process, you have to you get your aquaculture license, and you must write to the MSO for approval on navigation and lights. You can't do that until you have the license. Once you get approval and a statement from the MSO, you must write to your local harbour authority or your local council, whoever has control over that water, and see if they get approval from that. From that there, the local council must make an application to the Commissioner of Irish Lights. And the Commissioner of Irish Lights has to assess it in terms of a whole bay management plan and then come back in. That process can take a further 2 years. So you can go from a 4-year licensing process to then a 2-year wait to get lights and operational on the site. And the main reason for these experiences is accountability and communication. These can all be done in conjunction, but at the minute they aren't. And I suppose a vision for how we look at it, I use Ireland again as a base case because it's where my experience is. In 2017, the department issued recommendations under the aquaculture licensing review. It's now 2024. Them recommendations still haven't been issued, and we still operate in a period where we have 10-year license. But there are visions for it. So community-based models are now coming into a force. You see Carrymore over in Wales, great example of regenerative ocean farms. We need to create more market pathways. So there's talks in the market about creating advanced market commitments on seaweed productions. There's companies like North Sea Farm 1 or North Sea Farmers talking about production subsidies. And wild processors saying that a minimum of 3% should look at from cultivated material. And then the data and the scientific validation with this. So what needs to happen to create this future vision? Well, we need to focus on regenerative farming. We need to develop tools for monitoring and compliance. And then we need to prove regeneration benefits. And an example of this is the Blue Forest project with Ollie Hicks and Alapalago over in the UK. So the challenge is that there's a lack of land and sea spaces challenging our net zero targets. We have economic exclusion zones. We have marine protected areas, offshore wind farms, special areas of conservation, fishing areas, aquaculture areas, purely no-go areas. The new laws in bringing scope 3 emissions, I actually see that as an opportunity for restorative aquaculture and developing marine businesses. And the industry is in a chicken and egg scenario where we need scale for large processors to come in. And that comes in. So we need to advance the industry from cottage to industrial scale. And we need to take these learnings, develop nearshore, and then go further offshore. So what are the opportunities in the sector? Well, I pointed out that it's the fastest growing food sector in the world. And we still haven't figured out how to do it efficiently. There's ample opportunity to do that. Seaweed enhances biodiversity. But how do we monitor it? That's still not well known. How do we measure it? And then more importantly, how do we valorize it? And that value may be a financial one or can have a value to companies. The nature restoration law in the UK is coming into effect. What opportunities will that play for restorative aquaculture? Scope 3 emissions we've touched on. You can see companies like the Seaweed Company bringing it in and reducing it as a meat replacement for a percentage in burgers. And the world of AI is coming into effect. So how do we take advantage of this? And corporates are keen to get involved. So in the last few months and over the last 12 months, we've seen companies like Nestle investing into regenerative aquaculture through the Alapalago project. We've seen Amazon put 1.6 million into North Sea Farm 1. And more recently, we've seen IKEA invest into Nordic Sea Farms on developing that in for their product line. So we have a bit of an opportunity here, and there's no time like the present. So the Seafarers program is running its 3rd annual low trophic aquaculture workshop, and it's running a competition to fund two people up to trips up to Bergen. So that image of the seaweed farm up in Arctics, that's part of the trip. So there's a QR code there that'll take you to that competition. And then the second, if you're not directly involved in the industry, there is a farmer, Pure Ocean Algae, a company based out in West Cork, currently going through a crowdfunding stage. So that's a link to their page on Spark. So I'm here to talk about North Sea Farm 1. So North Sea Farm 1 is the co-location of seaweed and offshore wind, and we've managed to convince Amazon to fund it. The project involves North Sea farmers. Van Ord have to do the engineering to it. PML in the UK are looking at the carbon research. So what we're looking at is looking at the detritus from the farm, that seaweed that falls off, and where them particles will fall. So modeling that, and that's where Deltares come into the situation. And then looking at where it falls. So we've done before, during, and after, and I'll touch on that later in my slides. Algae are going to process it, and then we're involved with Silvestrium, looking at developing a carbon credit for it, and then ourselves, Simply Blue Group, involved in the seaweed cultivation. The farm is located 12 miles offshore. It's located in Vattenfall's newest wind farm, which was only finished completion in December 23. It has 139 turbines, 1.5 gigawatts of capacity, That's the equivalent of 1.5 million Dutch households. Probably heard enough from me, so I'll just let the project manager, Eve, talk you through it.
Farming is a groundbreaking project. We're trying to set up the first operational seaweed farm inside of an offshore wind farm. Never been done before on this level. We hopefully are able to validate the carbon sequestration potential of seaweed farms in an offshore environment. There's a lot of theories about it, but what's still lacking is actual measurements in the fields. If we are able to use the seaweed on land, whether it's for packaging, for food, for clothes, we can replace other sources that are less sustainable or even fossil-based. And if we do it on a larger scale, we could also hopefully have positive impacts on climate change. Amazon's Right Now Climate Fund have supported the North Sea Farm 1 project with a donation of €1.5 million. It really helped us to accelerate the innovation that we feel is necessary for the industry. This work would not be possible without the funding from Amazon. We've been trying to develop the project since 2020, and it was extremely difficult to find any parties willing to take such a bold step with us.
So one of the main work packages in the project is looking at, as I mentioned, detritus. So what that means is when the seaweed is at full side, you have particles that fall. This is grazed on by the fish. And in these particles as well, they fall to the seabed, remineralizing and creating benthic communities. There is dissolved carbon in this, and that's part of the research where Deltares have come into modeling where that seaweed would fall. So within the project itself, so Deltara is modeled based on situations on growth and falling rates, where it would fall. We've done before, during, and after benthic search on the side, so directly under in a number of locations across it. So then the farm you can see was installed and commissioned in August, and we just finished the deployment 3 weeks ago. And here is the video of the site. I have to say, being out there and seeing the scale and the size of the opportunity was an amazing experience. Afraid I've no music for this one. So what you see is a HPP floating tight. This is tighted to seabed with our eco anchors, and the net is later attached for the seaweed cultivation. So we put it out in November. We aim to harvest in the end of May of this year, and it'll go for processing then with Algaia before our next size. So the farm itself has a footprint of 10 hectares. So this is the first time a project has been done like this. So there's quite a lot of heavy engineering involved to it, and there's quite a lot of environmental monitoring and monitoring from licensed authorities, because it's the first time that a commercial agreement, so North Sea Farm 1 is a separate entity, and Vattenfall have come together to use the same shared marine space. And part of the project is having new technology. So one of these is the new wireless GPS camera. So this is the shot of the farm this morning. Small bit twisted in the waves, but it's still there. So that's part of my morning routines, looking at it. That's it from me. The QR code on the right is a link to my LinkedIn page if you want to contact directly or reach out. And I'm happy enough to open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much, Gareth. There are no questions at the minute. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature down in the bottom panel. And we'll take the questions at the end after Simona goes. Simona, the platform is yours. You can take over.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Simona Fondate. I am one of the EU projects officers for the Western Development Commission. I want to start introducing you the WDC, first of all. The WDC is a statutory body that was established in 1997 to promote social and economic development in the western region of Ireland. And we cover 7 counties from Donegal here to County Clare. And the organization covers many scopes, but we invest in the region to start with community loans, strategic initiatives. We promote the region, that it's a great place to live, to work, to do business. And we try to develop the region as well through European projects. That's the department I'm working myself, and through other initiatives as well. And a very important task for us as well, doing research and influencing and creating policy for the region. The regional development team, so the one that I'm working for, has many aims, but one of them is connecting the region internally and internationally through European projects, national schemes, communities of change. And we invest in the regions, in the growth of the region. And more than 11 millions were invested through money secured in 2023. And we work in many sectors. One of them is green economy, digitalization, social enterprise, and creative economy. And one of the projects that we are part of is GoNaturePositive. That is a project funded by Horizon Europe, EU fund. And this project started in 2024, in January 2024, and is going to end in 2027. This project is coordinated by Trinity College and has more than 20 partners spread across 14 countries. And it's the different partners are institutions, research institutions, non-profits, environmental organizations, and our goal is to accelerate awareness and transformative action towards a nature-positive economy. And we want to do that through different stakeholders, through policymakers, investors, businesses, and the wider society. This project was born because there were many challenges. There are many challenges that are rising, that we are all aware of. First of all, like to define what is a nature positive economy. There was no clear definition of it. Nature is going through a tough moment, and greenwashing is not helping either. So we thought that this project could be one of the solutions. And our goals, first of all, our first goal is to clarify what a nature positive economy is, clarify this concept, trying to define it. And we are trying as well to align with policy and practice and create indicators to measure this progress. And in the end, to scale up this project to a global reach. And we have 6 different pilots that are all related to nature positivity, forestry, tourism, agriculture, apiculture, blue economy, and green buildings. We had already 3 webinars about, if I'm not wrong, forestry, tourism, and agriculture. And today is the 4th autumn webinar. So why blue economy? It's evident, it's clear that blue economy plays a crucial role in ecology in terms of biodiversity conservation, coastal protection, climate regulation. Gareth brought us great examples of that. But this sector has as well a very high negative impact on nature as well. So habitat destruction, pollution, overfishing, invasive species that are spreading. But we want to say as well that there are a lot of opportunities for nature-based solutions. So ecosystem conservation and restoration, the creation of sustainable blue jobs, climate change mitigation adaptation, and as well regenerative transformation. Here there are some numbers of the blue economy sector. So 40% of the world population live in near coastal areas, and more than 3 billion people utilize the ocean for their livelihood, and 80% of the world trade is achieved through the sea, thanks to the seas. The blue economy directly employs over 4 million people in the EU and accounts to 1.3% of the EU GDP. As well, in Ireland, the blue economy, with more than 880,000 square kilometers of maritime coastline, is the country's largest natural asset. It's a great asset for Ireland. So what we wanted to do and what we're trying to do is to define the concept of nature positive economy, trying to give it a definition. And we're trying to do this through an open consultation that I started last month and is going to end on the 30th of November. And what we're trying to do is to give a definition, and what we're asking is to have your feedback on it, to understand if it's right, what you think about it, if you agree, and if you don't. We have created a concept note, an extract of the concept note, and as well 5 key messages that I'm going to share with you. And we want to know what you think about and if they align with what you think. So, but let's start asking us, why is nature so important for the economy? Everyone and everything in society depends on nature. It's obvious that all humans and businesses need a healthy planet to survive, to prosper, and to continue. And something that we have to say, though, is that nature is in a free fall, given by climate change, pollution. Our planet is in awful conditions right now, and natural disasters are increasing every year. Transforming our businesses and economic systems to work with and for nature will really help us to reverse these negative trends. Aligned, of course, with net zero and circular approaches, this system as well can transform and help our planet to be prosperous and nature positive. And what we really believe here is that for systemic change to really work, every person in society needs to be involved. That's why we're trying to get feedback from every possible stakeholder, from citizens, environmental NGOs, policymakers, research bodies, everyone. And so the need of a nature positive economy. The WWF in 2004 was writing that since 1970s, there's been an average decline of 733% in monitored wildlife populations. Both the loss of genetic diversity and the decline in functional integrity of the biosphere have exceeded their safe levels. And the global goal, like to counteract all of this, would be to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030, with a full recovery by 2050. So I want to start sharing with you the first key message. So this is what we propose. We propose that the nature positive economy means that the net results of all economic activities combined leads to an absolute increase in nature to the point of full recovery. This, according to the Nature Positive Initiative, and full recovery of nature means more nature in the world in 2030 than in 2020, followed by a continued recovery after that, after 2030. The nature positive economy contributes to achieving the global biodiversity framework and as well the SDGs from the UN to enhance societal well-being and prosperity. Here we can see this little scale that is trying to balance more towards nature positivity, but at the moment the economic activities are way more towards nature negativity instead. The second message here is about operationalizing the nature positive economy. So we propose that operationalizing the NPE means that businesses, governments, and other actors take actions across multiple scales and sectors, aligning with societal factors to improve social and ecological well-being and equity. We have here a little graph that explains and we're trying to include all the different actors, as you can see. So nature-based enterprises, finance, NGOs, citizens, standard bodies, policy, research, and businesses. These are our actors, as I was saying, and we need to take actions across multiple scales. So we have local scale, regional scale, national scale, EU scale, and global scale. And the sectors, so tourism, built infrastructure, forestry, blue economy, agri-food, and as well aligning with societal factors. So it's very important to always consider and always include prosperity, equity, and above all, human well-being. These are things that we cannot put aside. But we were trying to think what type of actions are needed here. To start, we need to reduce nature negative impacts. So identify and reform environmentally harmful policies, subsidies, and activities. This is the base. After that, we need to increase nature positive actions. So put in place policies, subsidies, and finance to support restoration and regeneration of nature, and invest in nature-based solutions and also enterprises. Then we need to act towards transformative change. So we are talking here about long-term actions towards a change of the system, and that may include different and better approaches to value nature and to measure as well the progress, in this case, beyond the GDP. And the third message instead is we know that the nature crisis is exposing significant dependencies, impacts, and nature-related risks. What we propose is that the nature-positive economy also presents opportunities. Nature-based solutions and nature-based enterprises present important pathways towards a nature-positive economy. One example here could be green jobs, for example, the creation of jobs. The transition to a nature-positive economy could create almost 400 million jobs by 2030. That's what the World Economic Forum was saying in 2020. Or the nature restoration leads to job creation and maintenance. And it's particularly important for local communities. It is estimated that the investment needs of the Natura 2000 network can support as many as 500,000 additional jobs. These are some of the examples of different institutions basically saying that nature can also provide, nature-based solutions can provide jobs, green jobs, and that's what we're trying to say, we're trying to think. But at first I ask myself, what are nature-based enterprises. Many enterprises that are working in this sector may not define yet themselves as such, but this is a definition to try understand if they are like that. So nature-based enterprises use nature as a core element of their product or service, offering for the planning, the delivery, or stewardship of nature-based solutions, and engage in economic activity. Nature-based enterprises are driven by a mission to work with and for nature. And nature-based solutions play a vital role in nature-positive economy. They boost stocks of natural capital, stimulate ecosystem services, and deliver many benefits to business and society. One example here, as I was saying, green jobs. The fourth message here, our fourth message is to say that it's essential to measure progress towards, nature positive economy. We propose an integrated approach, building on existing and emerging best practice to measure progress of first businesses, governments, and other actors, and the actions that as well they take. Across clearly defined scales and sectors. I was mentioning before the different sectors, the different scales. So scales from local to global, sectors from forestry to green buildings, and taking into account as well the impact of those actions on societal factors. So we were saying human well-being, prosperity, and this to lead to a measurable impact on halting nature loss, to stopping nature loss, contributing to nature restoration and regeneration, and transforming systems in a long term. This is another graph to explain what I was talking about before. So the different scales, sectors, actors, and societal factors. We're trying to be inclusive. We're trying to understand as well if something is missing here, if every of these actors should be included or different actors should be included in this process. And we are asking again your feedback on this. On the right, you can see some examples of how on some tools, how we are trying to measure progress in this case. You can recognize some of the SDGs, natural capital accounting, GDP indicators. These are just some of them that we are using at the moment and that we are going to use. This is our fifth and last key message. So an integrated society approach is what we are taking, an approach that respects human rights and is extremely necessary to achieve nature positive economy. We invite all actors to have their say through these consultations. A nature positive economy will require legislation to stop harmful activities, and legislation that will support as well nature positive actions, alongside as well with citizen-led initiatives and organizations. As well, we will need respect for international human rights, applying best practice guidelines, for example, the UN guideline principles of business and human rights. And we will need as well to support equity, fairness, and justice. And something very important here is to emphasize that net positive means as well that certain parts of nature will be lost. We need meaningful participation from all society for a democratic view of which part of nature loss can be accepted. For example, through a citizen assembly. This is very important as well with actors that have a close relationship with nature. For example, indigenous people or local communities, farmers. this was the last message. I would like to share with you briefly where you can give your feedback. Today you will have a Q&A section just after my presentation to ask your question, to give your opinion, your feedback. But I would like to show you where you can give your feedback through the form that was created by GoNaturePositive. You can go to GoNaturePositive.eu website and click on Participate Now, and you will see this form. And this form has 14 multiple choice questions. And the first question is about which stakeholder group do you identify the most? And I shared before the definition of nature-based enterprises, and I hope some of the businesses will recognize themselves as such, as nature-based enterprises. And as well, there are other questions at the bottom. If you go back to the homepage, you will be able to see at the bottom of the page the 5 key messages, a slide deck with the key messages but explaining more details. And then you have the concept note and the executive summary. And this is the first 2 pages of the concept note. That's that with me. Thanks for your attention. I'll leave you to the Q&A.
Thank you, Simona. That was really interesting to know your take on it. And thank you, Gareth, for the very interesting presentation, or maybe like a peep into your experience and of the project that's ongoing of Netherlands Coast. And we have few questions here. So first question for Gareth from Neil O'Reilly. What, in your opinion, is the reason more wind companies aren't getting involved in this opportunity? You want to answer that, Gareth?
Yeah. So it's starting. So it's all about legislation. So in the Netherlands, they'd be the most proactive and developed economy looking at offshore wind. And what they've done is they've stated that the area in between the wind turbines isn't owned by the wind parks or wind operators. It's up to the Dutch government to legislate that. And so they brought out a very interesting approach where they designated areas. So they went from a plan-led approach, and they designated areas specifically for seaweed cultivation, for mussel farming, for floating solar. So some of the imagery that we would have seen that deployed is solar duck have done this in a similar area, which is floating solar. Now, there's pluses and minuses to that, and I give you an example of a plan-led approach. It was great visuals, and it was great ambition and that started the ball rolling on it. But from our side on it, they took an overview of an area, and they said, for example, Borssele was the area of the wind farm that they mapped out, and they designated this area for aquaculture. And when we went to look into it and apply for our license in Borssele, part of the conditions was for this area, for the first project that they insisted on having piles put in for the project. Now, when we did the research and we looked at the environmental conditions inside of it, the soil conditions weren't suitable for piles. You would have needed a 280-ton vibration hammer to put the piles in that area. And then, so that whole area that was designated for seaweed, when you went down and did the DD on the site, wasn't suitable. And that's what allowed with that. But they were flexible and movable, and they allowed us to move to HKZ, and then Vattenfall themselves came in and were interested in this. So I think you're going to see more developing over the next 10 years. A lot of it has been on concentrating on O&M, but this co-use agreement, it's one of the biggest deliverables from the project. It's the first time that 2 private bodies have organized a cooperation agreement on that specific area. So I think you're going to see more in the future.
Thank you for that. And we are getting quite a few questions here. So I'm just moving on to the next question from Ravi Teja. The question is, semi-urban societies are forced to use plastics due to low cost when compared to seaweed-based plastics or corn-based. How can you target them?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, semi-urban societies are forced to use plastics due to low cost when compared to seaweed-based plastics or corn-based. how can you target them?
I'm afraid I'm not one to talk on seaweed plastics. There's a couple of great companies doing it. So Napla are doing it in the UK. There's Sway in the States that are doing it, and there's a couple of other. I forget. I met two ladies out of Belgium that were doing a new packaging, seaweed packaging. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that.
Here on the other side of seaweed, seaweed aquaculture, but yeah, this is maybe the market side of question. Another question from Teresa Hooks. The scale of investment needed to deliver this type of project probably needs private sector investment. What were the key factors for persuading Amazon to support? Can address those in an Irish context.
So Amazon have invested in it in Irish crops. So the Climate Right Now Fund has invested in a peatland restoration project. That project went live just earlier this year. So from an Irish context, the Climate Right Now Fund is looking at different projects for it. For one of their main pieces in the project is looking at non-for-profit organizations and how they can be a driver of transformative change. So one of the issues that's put in front of seaweed is the lack of space to deliver on this goal. And then with offshore wind developers, they have an issue in terms of that the farms, for example, in floating wind farms, can take up to 200 hectares between 4 floating wind turbines. And they're under the EU Green Deal and under new legislation from the EU are focusing on how they use that space more efficiently. It can't just be left as an open area. So there's push and pull factors in both that bring them in. And I think they saw a solution saying we could be the first to do some of this and open up a space and start the conversation. And that's what I think North Sea Farm 1 has delivered.
Thank you, Gareth. And one more question on the chat box. It's seaweed culture and licensing is an expensive task. How can it be affordable and welcoming for the new entrepreneurs who are eligible to contribute to nature?
Communication. There is a lack of communication from licensing authorities. It was probably the most reassuring, frustrating, and I suppose bit that gave me the most encouragement that we can succeed is that during the licensing process in the Netherlands, there was a constant communication, weekly phone calls, and when the issues arose, they would literally identify and we would get into a room and we would talk it out. Inside in the Irish licensing process, that's not the same. It's a much slower process. So by introducing regular updates and interactions with it, I think we can speed that up. It is costly, and it's costly because it's time consuming. Waiting for 4 years for development, you might have investors and lined up, and your status might change after 4 years of waiting for it. It's a challenge. What I'd encourage you to do is there is multiple great seaweed farmers in Ireland, in the UK, in Europe. Align with one of those to utilize their licenses, and you can have shared cost, and that kind of comes into the community pieces. So there's a number of seaweed farms looking for it there. So that would be my first step: is align with someone in the area, have a look what's there, and then see if you can work with them.
Thank you. And we have one more question. It's a link. Can you access the link, Gareth, there on the chat box? It's let me see if I can access it. Yeah, it's the link to the nature restoration law. So the question would be, is it an enabler? How do we account for the Irish implementation, etc.? I don't actually get the question. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so the nature restoration law, I believe it is. So in the UK it is. So biodiversity net gain and how we look at it. So for offshore wind, you'll see a lot more talk on oyster restoration. You're going to see a lot more on biodiversity enhancement on routes in, and a 10% biodiversity swing in developments. Now, if we can, as I said in the presentation, if we can first value and then monetize how we do these biodiversity developments, then I see it as an opportunity for lying in it. And that's where AI will come into it and where we can look at it. So I see huge opportunity in that sector, but we need to move from rhetoric and scientific research into delivering real results that can translate into value. And that can be a financial value for the company doing it or for the service that you're providing.
We have a few more questions in the Q&A tab, and thank you, Gareth, for promptly answering all the questions that were coming up there. And we have a question, I think maybe Gareth has replied to it, but Simona, if you can weigh in. How is the West of Ireland promoting nature positive in the blue economy? Do you have some specific examples?
think Simona might.
Yeah. Well, I think I can bring the example of the projects that the Western Development Commission is developing at the moment. I think that's a very good example. So the European Union like funds environmental projects, and GoNaturePositive is a good example of that, where there are opportunities for institutions, research institutions, for example, Trinity or Oxford, that they put together their efforts to create evidence-based research, and then to develop it into more practical actions, for example, in influencing policies, or trying to create a network of nature-based enterprises. I think the Connecting Nature platform is a good example of that, where there is the regenerative aquaculture group that puts together their efforts trying to create this network where people can interface and talk with each other, and can trying to promote nature positivity and a nature-based enterprise concept, let's say. I hope I responded to the question.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, yeah, we have a few more questions. The question would be, I think it's aimed at Gareth. What are the key incentives for wind farms to take up regenerative aquaculture at scale across Europe?
So I'll give you an example. So Ireland, we don't have aquaculture licensing beyond 12 nautical miles. So in Ireland, that may be a challenge to look at it. In the UK, in UK waters, the area in between the wind turbines is operated, and consents need to come from the wind farm operators. In the Netherlands, though, that area, as I previously mentioned, is open for licensing. And so as new wind farms develop, EU policy is driving this. So there's an initiative called non-price criteria, and that affects wind farm leasing. So when they're making applications into these areas, they have to put a certain prevent in terms of community benefit and how they're going to enhance biodiversity net gain. And so how they can tie in. So offshore wind is big infrastructure, big ports. While if you bring in an aquaculture farm that involves, you can reskill fishermen to train into it, who are seafarers and are aware of how the sea operates in an offshore environment. And then that production product and the biomass from that can be taken onshore. So you see real community developments in. And I think that's the initiative that you need to be focused on in terms of looking at it. But everything you do offshore is expensive and challenging from a licensing point of view, and robust conditions. So it just adds an added layer of complexity to it. There is available space, but you need to have your market analysis done on what it can deliver.
Thank you, Gareth. The next question, I think it's for Simona regarding the open consultation. Could we include individuals level as well, also planning seem missing in policy, etc.? And I think we have another question on the same line. Will the pilots work with individuals on the ground for a period of time, or how will they work?
Yes, so absolutely. The involvement of individuals is fundamental. The consultation has been open from policymakers to citizens and organizations, NGOs. It's open really to everyone to give their contribution, to share their opinion on the definition, to the key messages, the concept note. And I think it's very important that everyone shares their feedback, because we want to include every possible perspective into it. And to respond to the second question, we will work we'll work with individuals on the ground. At the moment, we are on a theoretical phase or conceptual phase of the project, but there will be a moment where we will start a call, and we are going to recruit, let's say, 10 nature-based enterprises to trying to invest in their development and trying to make sure that they are aware of the contribution that they're giving, but trying to implement and improve the sustainability as well of the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Simona.
Thanks.
Sorry, I missed a question in between for Gareth. It's from Ravi Teja. In countries like India, where the manpower and working costs are affordable, is there any possibility for the Irish seaweed company to align with us for increasing the seaweed productivity?
Yes, there's enormous opportunity to look at doing it. So labor is a big restriction coming into it. And if you look at the Hatch Seaweed Inside reports, kind of identifies pieces on that. But yeah, I think there's big opportunities for it. For them to drop me an email. My link was in the back, and we can touch base.
Yeah, I don't think I've missed any questions. I think that's all. And we have four more minutes in the allotted time, if I may say. If anybody has any questions to drop in, please do it. If not, I think we can conclude the session for today. Thank you so much, Simona, and thank you so much, Gareth, for joining the webinar and sharing your experience and insights into the industry and the ongoing project. And thank you, everyone, for joining the session today. And we have our last webinar in the series happening tomorrow evening, and the topic is mainstreaming green buildings in the EU. And yeah, that will be the last of this autumn webinar series in connection with the GoNaturePositive consultation going on. And the webinar will be available next week. The recording of the webinar will be available next week. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.